found AHO Radio. We're authentic human outliers coming together to help heal the fear of being authentic. To bring back genuine human conversation. No hype, no sensationalism, just honest talk about the critical issues affecting society, affecting humankind. And now, here are the hosts of AHO Radio, John Krotec and Bill Protzmann. John, honest talk, man. How can we get more honest than where we are right now? This is crazy.
Well, we can't, we talk about, manufactured bliss and how do you be authentic in an inauthentic world at times. And this is what we do is we talk. We use these technological tools to bring guys like George Mullen who are making differences for the planet into a conversation that's real and live. And I'm just blessed to be with you, Bill, and to have George on the show today. But good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Hey, George. I mean, I feel like I should be CBS here. You're looking so professional and confident and sitting in your library and just ready to give the wisdom of the world, It's like, glad to have you here.
I wish I had some wisdom, Bill.
Hey, let's start there. I mean, imposter syndrome is a big thing these days. How do you stay authentic and grounded and in your lane and continue to do what you do, George? I mean, you do a lot, but how does that work?
That's a good question, Bill. I don't know that it works, but my basis is always based on thinking. And I think thinking is actually a pretty rare thing. And I'm not in any way saying I'm a great thinker, but I try to think. And most people just regurgitate what they grew up with or what they hear instead of actually trying to think about issues or think about what's going on. So that's always kind of the basis for the different things I've gotten involved with. Hopefully I answered your question.
No, that's a great answer, thinking is what it's all about, and sometimes you're so right, George, that people just regurgitate what they learn. And, before we get into the deep things, tell us a little bit about Colorado and what that was like, at the University of Colorado. What was going on there? It's a pretty cool school. Boulder's a nice town. What were you doing up there, man? Tell us about that.
I was loving life. Boulder was awesome. I went to school there. I'm a California native, San Diego native. And I just wanted, San Diego was a greght place, but I wanted out. And so I went to University of Colorado sight unseen, and it was spectacular. Boulder was wonderful. I had the time of my life, and I often think about it. But if anyone who's spent time in Boulder, it's just spectacular.
You guys have that. You have the buffalo, right? That's the golden buffalo.
Yeah, Ralphie, and they run him out there when CU plays home games. They run him out at the beginning of the game at halftime, and it's a massive buffalo. They have like 8 people running with them with ropes, and
it's awesome, man. I did have the luxury of going there back in the day. We went to a football game there, and I got to see Ralphie run all over the place. And you guys really got it going on. It's a really nice campus. But,
it's beautiful, and it's nestled right up to the Flatiron Mountains. And what most people don't know is Colorado, although it snows and it can get cold, they advertise like 300 plus days a year of sunshine. And it's true. It is super sunny. And that would be, you get a snowstorm and the next day it would be crystal clear, which makes it even colder actually. But spectacular sunshine, a really outdoorsy place and just fun. I mean, maybe too much fun, maybe not enough studying, right?
Yeah, man. What was your degree in? What did you graduate with?
History was my degree with a political science minor and a lot of philosophy.
So a lot of the writing that you've done since is sort of coming out of that historical political science place, even though as an artist, like you function in the community and in a creative space too.
Yeah, a lot of it for me stems back to history and historical impacts. And that's why so many people, in the current epidemic that we're having, people think, well, unless you're an epidemiologist, you can't really weigh in on these issues. Whereas I think historically gives you kind of a stronger basis if you look back in history and how things have happened with epidemics and such.
The historical basis for what we're in right now, does that give you any kind of confidence, or is it more of a wake up call? How do you sit on that?
Well, to me, I think fear and panic are running the show and have been for the last 3 months. I think it's a terrible epidemic and no one wants it. And we don't want anyone to have it, but you don't just shut everything down and freeze up. And that's never happened before. And I think it's extraordinary. I think it's straight out fear and panic running the show. And now I understand why witches were actually burned in Salem in the 17th century. Yeah, you see what happens when people go into a freak out mode, the things they will do.
You know, you said it so well, George, because, you know, what I've taken from all of this and what you just said is that we're trying to get a one size fits all for all the different communities. And you're so right, man. The solution is not to shut it down. What we need to do and what we need to find is leadership that instills confidence, hope, not anxiety and fear, because when you have anxiety and fear, we end up with the state that we're in now where everybody just feels really uncertain. People's lives are being ruined. It's really extraordinary because I'm like you guys. It's the first time I've ever seen anything like this. And it is definitely a different paradigm. And you're so right. Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, you know, there's already 37 million people have lost their jobs in 6-8 weeks. A lot of those jobs aren't coming back. People think it's just going to snap back. It's not. I mean, it's self-inflicted damage. But one thing, you know, going back to history and just talking about recent history, there was an epidemic, the H2N2 in 1958 that killed, I think, about 120,000 Americans and about 1 million people worldwide. And then there was another one in 1968, H3N2 or something, that killed 1 million people around the world and another 100,000 Americans, but nothing was shut down. And we want to save all lives that we can, but it doesn't mean you can just freeze up, because it's economic carnage out there and a lot of people are really hurting.
Yeah, permanent hurt.
And you're right, George. A lot of those businesses aren't coming back.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they can they're throwing money around like drunken sailors, thinking you can save it that way. But if you're a restaurateur and you can take a loan to try and save your business, but you're looking at, well, even when we reopen, I may not have the business to sustain, so I'm going to take another 100 grand of debt to sit around for 6 months while I go right into the hole, and now I have 100 grand more of debt. So it's panic and fear just running the show, and I don't know what to say. And you'd love to be able to blame one person or one party, but it's across the board. I mean, there's plenty of people that see it right, but there's people panicking everywhere.
So where's the leadership? I mean, what qualities are what qualities of a leader do we need most right now?
Well, I mean, I guess I go back to what's that?
Calm.
Oh, calm. Yeah. Yes.
Calm leadership.
Reasonableness. Yeah. I think we could all argue that you should shut down certain areas that are having terrible time. Maybe even New York City, maybe New Jersey, maybe a couple of areas. Southern California, there's no way San Diego should be shut down. There's very few cases, and they've created economic carnage. So yes, it's like you said, one size fits all. So since a few cities needed it, everyone, all the governors panicked and enforced it everywhere. And so everyone's going through the same economic carnage without the same fundamental problem in the community. And crazy.
Great points, because, here I am in Florida. I think the median age in Florida is like 70, right? It seems like everybody that's here is retired except for my wife and me and our friends. But we've had less than 2,000 deaths in a state with hundreds of millions of people. And it just, not hundreds, tens of millions of people. I don't want to exaggerate, but to shut down the city and to know business owners that we know are not going to be able to reopen. In fact, my old business that I sold to a good friend of mine from high school, it may not reopen. We were open for 24 years. And so, and then the people that patronize those places that don't have a job that could spend money there. I talked to a lady in Brooklyn that said, I spent $20 every day going to the coffee shop down around the corner. She says, and I've learned now to brew my own coffee, and that's one customer in one coffee shop in America. Multiply that times 100 customers. This is a huge hit. So, yeah.
Oh, and it's going to go on for a long, long time. And I would love to be dead wrong, and it bounces right back. But I think the carnage coming from this is going to perpetuate for a long, long time. I mean, I think there's no question we're in a depression right now. Whether the depression is for 2 months or 5 years, who knows? We'll see.
Yeah. Well, you made it back to Southern California. And I know I love San Diego, where you guys are at. I spent a little bit of time out there. I lived in La Jolla, or south of La Jolla, actually, in Pacific Beach.
Pacific Beach.
Yeah. And you're kind of leading some revolutions of your own, taking history and blending it with art and doing some pretty cool things at StudioRevolution. tell us a little bit about that. Well, how did you get the idea and what's going on with StudioRevolution?
Well, it's like anything, it evolves over time. And as I was painting and trying to come up with different concepts, and a lot of my things challenge the status quo or what people think is the way to handle things. And so I frankly, I can't exactly remember where I came up with the term StudioRevolution, but it was kind of, and I think that it's the violent aside, a revolution in art and thought, trying to look at what is and come up with a different approach, maybe a unique approach, maybe a good approach, maybe not, but at least looking at different approaches. So it's really trying to be an art and a revolution in art and thought, but everything comes down to thinking and thought. So that's kind of, again, the basis of taking it, looking at what is, and seeing if there is a better or different way of doing things. And so the StudioRevolution kind of became the basis for all my operations, whether it's in the painting or writing or projects through Rotary or Sunbreak Ranch, which is our homeless effort, et cetera. But again, it goes back to thinking. And that's why, most people, you grow up and your parents are Republicans or Democrats and you become Republican or Democrat, you kind of follow what you were indoctrinated with in a way. And then there's always some of us that rebel. And if your dad was a Republican, you become a Democrat just to spite him. So, but again, those aren't exactly rational ways of thinking. But many years ago, most people hold to their beliefs. You hear what you hear when you're young and you stick to them. But many years ago, someone brought up an issue to me and I really started thinking it through, an issue that I'd always believed in one way. And then I realized that I was totally wrong and I completely changed my position. And that was an awakening moment for me because I thought, you know what, that wasn't hard at all. And I'm glad I did it. And so suddenly then I said, I'm willing to look at any of my positions. If you can show me an argument that I'm in the wrong, I'm actually happy to change that position. And so it kind of opens everything up when you start thinking that way, because to hold one position and change it is really not a big deal, but few people do it. They all just kind of entrench whatever that belief is. You know what I mean?
Is that because of comfort or because of intellectual, how do I say this politely, not wanting to investigate anything new?
I think it's probably not wanting to investigate anything new because it takes some time and effort. And in a way, I think people think it's admitting that they were wrong, which, well, I mean, I can tell you the issue for me that changed it was, my father was a strong Republican, and but more about 1776, the core beliefs of the country. So I kind of grew up that way. And being in that orbit, capital punishment was always something that I thought was the right thing. If it had actually been used properly as a real dissuader, that it could be very effective. And a friend of mine, a smart friend that was a district attorney of Jackson Hole many years ago, he said, George, you should take a look at, and he pointed out a couple of things about it. And I really started thinking, I thought, I don't think that's the role of society, that it should be killing. You can protect society and punish that person, life without parole. It's way cheaper. And if you're wrong, you can always go fetch the fellow from prison and make it right. Yeah. And I thought, so for me, it was like, that's a completely wrong position. And ever since I've been against capital punishment. Wouldn't say I'm for being easy on criminals, but I just don't think that's the role of society. I suppose you can make an argument about actual spies. That's a little different issue. But but once I changed that position, I thought, you know what? That wasn't hard at all. And I think now I got a better position. I mean, I don't know what your positions are on that issue, but that was the issue for me that kind of opened everything up. And so I'm much more willing to admit I'm wrong. And I guess wrong isn't the right word. I'm willing to change my position because I don't know if there's right and wrong in a lot of those.
You pointed that out, George, and I think that's fantastic because change, it's all about change. And, Bill's question, and, we get indoctrinated into these beliefs. My dad was a diehard Republican too. And I can tell you, I have certain beliefs about things that would just make him turn over in his grave. And, I believe in the Constitution and all those great things. But like you just pointed out, there are some aspects of it that I sometimes question. And I've been wrong so many times in my life. I'm probably the poster child for wrong. but I wasn't wrong. It was just a belief that I had that I've changed. So the transformative power to make a choice to change is really what it's all about. You know, I was looking at your art, Barbed America Art.
Oh, yeah.
And phenomenal stuff. You know, on the surface, somebody doesn't appreciate what you're trying to do, may look at that as, you know, what is that? You know, but tell us about, you know, the influences that you had to go into Barbed America Art Project, and you know, who were your artistic influences? What was the methodology? What are you trying to say? Because I think it's great, man.
Thank you, John. And what you're saying about being able to, you know, you said you've been wrong many times. We all have, but being willing to admit that becomes, you know, what's that? The road to salvation or something? Is that you know, once you can see that you've erred, then you can actually start getting on the right track. And you know, back on kind of the point, my dad being a Republican, so I'm trying to think, it was Bush 1, George Bush Sr. was president, and that was the time I left the Republican Party, and ever since I've been non-party. When people ask, I just say my party's 1776, kind of the country. So I'm non-party now. For Barbed America, I am pretty passionate about America and passionate about especially the founding principles, 1776 and such. And so it was those paintings, which are the American flag with barbed wire incorporated into it and also using different colors. It's about showing the contrast in America, or the contrast in human nature. And the first flag that I did, working with barbed wire is very difficult, by the way. I mean, I had lots of cuts on my arms to learn the hard way doing it. And, but it's a great thing. It evokes emotion when you see it. And it was the first one was called Freedom and Tyranny. And basically that America represents freedom, but then it's got its own tyrannies. I mean, it had slavery for the first 80, 90 years of the nation, which is kind of a little bit in conflict with we're all created equal, right? And Jefferson knew that, and they actually, but that's a long story. So it's meant to show the contrast, and then you can do that in multiple ways. You know, you can say, you know, freedom or tyranny. It could be, you could put Trump versus Hillary, capital punishment versus life. You know, the whole host of issues you can look at and say America's in the right in this one, not in that one. And by and large, though, America is a great nation and represents great principles. Some people, you know, they just want to hate on America, and I don't think that's right. So my thing is more about showing the contrast and maybe where you can better ourselves or our nation, because we can always strive to be better, right?
Right.
George, I have an emotional response to the Barbed America. It gets me. I have an emotional response to the Barbed America. The thinking part of you that assembled that art has triggered a heart response in me. And that then promotes change in some way. I don't know where I'm going to change or how it's going to change me. But I love that under the hood, there's emotional content going on. Can you dig into that for us a little bit? Like, I know it's inspiration and that you're thinking about it, but pull in the emotional side.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a little hard to describe, but yeah, I mean, there's something about, and I've learned that in working with barbed wire and then seeing people's reactions to it. I mean, it really does it evokes a lot of weird emotions. You know, prison, concentration camps, pain, and I can attest to that it can be painful when if it flashes back at you, it leaves scars fast. That's why I always try and wear goggles when I'm working with the barbed wire, because I don't want to lose an eye if it gets away from me, because it comes in generally binds, so it's like a big line of string.
Coil.
Yes, exactly. And coil, that's the word I'm looking for. So the emotional thing, I mean, it is an emotional thing, because you're using that to evoke the emotion, but it's the concept that goes into freedom and tyranny. I mean, they're emotional concepts. I guess it's hard for me to put in words, Bill. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. It's good.
It's...
I'm pulling the thread, because one of the things that's so amazing is that there's, for me, whether I'm reading an article you've written or looking at a piece of work, it always gets back to to compassion. It pulls my compassion string.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And there's always a paradox in it too, because barbed wire is what sort of made the Western frontier manageable.
That's right.
On the one hand.
A lot of people don't think about that, unfortunately, but you're absolutely right.
You know, so you get both those things going on, and that sets up this conflict, this tension. Like, how can I look at this painting of an American flag under barbed wire? How can I look at that and hold this tension to get me to some new place? And the invitation is to change your mind, not make a big old shift, but to open to something new, to find that new thing. And I think that's remarkable and also very courageous, because whether or not you intend that, that's happening, George.
Yeah, well, yeah. And on the original paintings, I didn't write in the caption. In recent years, I've written them down in the corner. Like maybe it'll say America on one side, and over on the right, it'll say freedom and tyranny, or like one of them I have United States of money. And instead of the color red, the color is green. And so again, they're meant to make people think, well, the United States does stand for freedom, but is it too money oriented? Are the people too devoted towards that? You know, that's a broad thing to say. Some are, of course, and probably most aren't. But so I tend to try and write the one or two words there meant to make people think, so they can see it front and center what my focus is anyway. Their focus can be whatever they choose, but what my focus was in that particular piece.
So your intention is to lead people in the direction of your thought, not overtly, but to suggest that that you have an answer, right?
You know, yeah, I suppose in my mind I may, but it's meant more to make the person look at that contrast themselves and think about it. And I guess part of the reason I write down the couple of words there to make them focus. Years ago, I had one of the paintings up in my house, and we were selling the house, and my realtor said, you know, George, I think you should take that painting down. Because he felt that I think it troubled him, but I think he worried how people coming in would take it. And so that's kind of, I know that too. And again, I'm a pretty patriotic guy, but I don't want a World War II veteran or anyone that's passionate to come in and say, man, Mullen is an America hater. You know, that's not my intent. So that's, I guess, why I will write in the caption there, so people can kind of see what the focal point is, not just that I'm trying to, stick a knife in America for the fun of it.
No, I think it's definitely thought-provoking. Sitting here listening to it and looking at the artwork, you evoked a couple of songs by a Native American artist by the name of John Trudell. One song is Rich Man's War, and the other song is Bombs Over Baghdad. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, I'd love to commission a piece with concertina wire in the American flag and something to do with blood and oil. I mean, man, I think you could put together a freaking crazy piece. The concertina wire is the wire that the soldiers use.
No, I know it. It's scary.
I used to pull out spools of that. Could you imagine, though? Maybe we commission a piece. But, I think that thought provocation and what you're, like the Syria, American Syria, with all that going on, I think it does. It provokes a deeper thought. And like Bill points out, if people take a closer look, there's a lot more than just stars and bars and barbed wire. There's ideological meanings that stretch the mind and can hit the core of the heart, like just you talking about it now, what it's done for me. Amazing.
Well, that I can't even say it, concertina.
That stuff.
Yeah, that's above my pay grade, but that is some wicked stuff. Because I when I drive by barbed wire, I'm always looking at it for obvious reasons. But I look at that stuff and I think, oh man, I have trouble with traditional barbed wire with that razor on top.
Oh, I know. You have to wear a whole suit for that.
I may
look like armor.
I'll look like Edward Scissorhands after trying to do a piece with that stuff.
You'd have to wear body armor, but you could probably put together some really classic pieces. And there's a whole veteran marketplace out there that would love it. Just saying, man. I'm always looking for these ideas. But thank you for doing that, because I think it is important as an artist and a historian to constantly provoke thought, which you do in your articles. And you basically were on the front line of predicting almost, or clairvoyantly, the debacle with our economy back in the late 2000s.
Oh, well, that's an interesting one, John, because
yeah,
I mean, obviously I've got a lot of experience in the financial markets. And so, well, that was, how would you say, around 2005, I had an epiphany because I kind of realized how I was spending money. You know, everyone was using home equity lines, not necessarily for the home. And I mean, buying cars, boats, da 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 da.
oh
And,
yeah,
and I had done something, and but my home equity values have been going up a ton, like everyone. And then I looked around, I thought, everyone I know is doing this, and I thought, whoa, something is really, really wrong here, because everyone's buying all this stuff in mass on debt and convinced that markets and real estate are just going to keep booming. And so it was really an epiphany. So I wrote those 2 articles in 2006-ish saying that the first article was titled "The Coming Financial Tsunami," and it was published in the San Diego Union Tribune, which I was surprised they published it. I caught so much heat from stockbrokers I know and realtors, because what I learned is people don't want to hear what goes against their what serves them. Yeah, that's hard to. I mean, everyone.
No, it's perfect, man.
Everyone's in, and you don't want the guy saying, "Hey, we might be heading for some real trouble here." So I caught a lot of heat from a number of people for those 2 articles, and then of course a year later the whole thing collapsed, and then I got a lot of attention for them. But it was really just common sense. I woke up to what I was doing and everyone around me was doing. I said, "Whoa, there's a real problem here," and it was obvious for everyone. Just most of us weren't willing to look at it. And I only was because it was just kind of an epiphany when I realized what I was doing, and then looked around and said, whoa, this is going to be a bad deal. And it was terrible.
It was horrible. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I feel that what's going on right now is way worse, which scares the hell out of me, because this one wasn't based on super overvaluations like it was in 07, 08. This one is just sheer panic and fear, and you've created this massive problem, and it's like, how do you get out of that? And it kind of, you go back and you think about Franklin Roosevelt's famous quote, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." And yeah, he was right, because the fear is the problem, and it's creating a massive problem globally. And go back to which hunts the whole thing. Fear is the issue.
But you can't print yourself out of this one either, like you said. You cannot print yourself out of this one.
But they're going to try, and they already are. The funny thing is, fear, and I think the problem with fear is we've always heard that all our lives, right? Oh, fear and panic is a terrible thing. But it's rare when it happens in such a scale. And once it's going, you can't stop it. It's a tsunami. And that's why we're all just forced to go along for the ride on this. And it's tragic. Back to what you said about them printing their way out of it, I did a little calculation. I can't even remember exactly how much they've squandered already trying to combat this, whether it's 3 trillion or 5 trillion. But I did the calculation on $5 trillion, and I haven't seen a penny. Probably you guys haven't either. And it's flowing out there just like it was in 07, 08. And I thought, well, let's think about that for a second. Let's say it's 5 trillion. If it's not 5 trillion yet, it will be before long. And let's not include the children. I think there's about 330 million people in this country, and I think about 75 million are children under 18. So let's just say all the adults, 255 million people. Now, if I did the calculations right, if they took that 5 trillion and just gave every adult an equal stake, I believe it would be close to $20,000 per person. So a couple would get 40,000. Now that would be the most equal way if you really needed to help the people. I mean, I'm not a big fan of printing either way, but if you're going to do it, why not give every adult $20,000 as opposed to this murky money where it ends up? Who even knows?
Who knows? Yeah.
I'll send $1,200 and that'll be it. And somehow a bunch of companies will get a ton of money. And, most small businesses will fail. Yeah. The most equal way to do it would be just cut a check for 20 grand to each adult. So a couple gets 40 grand. And now that would go a ways to kind of keeping you to sustain for a while anyway. Yeah. I don't know. That's a crazy idea, but
no, but it's a good idea, because I heard the other day where, some business owners that I know, they think this is an assault on small business, that it's kind of like a position that they're put in that, when the smoke does clear. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, George, that a lot of this is not coming back. The backbone of America is small business. It's not the ones that are getting the huge bailouts. And truly, where are we going with this? And then what is going to be the fallout when the smoke, if it ever clears the way it's going? So, you know, some very interesting questions. And again, Bill and I talk about this incessantly, you know, the fear, we're starting to see even the influencers that we speak about and we hear, they're even getting into a desperate state of mind, and they don't seem to have any answers. And, you know, people that we look up to as social influencers, they're struggling. So where are we at? Where are we going? How can we improve things and get out of this mess if we can, in a way that helps the overall society and not be called a socialist? You know, how does that work?
Yeah. Yeah, that is
complex.
That is the $1 trillion question, John.
Yeah,
right.
Certain. You know, the key is not to let yourselves get into this kind of crazy position, and you know, and then you also have to go to the assault on our constitutional rights. You know, if there's a clear and present danger, like maybe you could make that argument in New York City that you need to shut things down. Understood. I think we're all in on that. Hey, you know, if their body bags are going out, we don't want anyone to die. We'll shut down. But to just shut down the whole nation like this, and the arbitrary things of what you can or can't do, it's crazy. And like you said, the small businesses, probably a majority aren't going to come back. And the ones that take these loans, they're throwing more good money after bad because they're going to be left with the debt. You know, that doesn't go away. That's what people, you know, equity values can go away. Debt never goes away unless you pay it off. I mean, they keep haunting you. And,
you're so right, man. You know, it did freak me out that you could buy whiskey, but you couldn't go to your local church. You know, gosh, whoever thought they'd see that in America? And, you know, and then, you know, the whole protest thing is a whole other issue, how people stand on it. But you're right. It has been an assault, and, you know, clear and present danger. Who are the enemies? Foreign, domestic? I mean, what is going on? And I think most Americans are looking for conversations like this that talk about solutions, or leadership that instills in the people that they jurisdict a sense of calm, and you said it, George, rationality and even-mindedness. Yeah. Has seemed to have gone out the door with a lot of our elected officials.
Oh, no question. You know, so I saw Governor or Mayor de Blasio saying anyone that goes swimming this weekend on the beach, they're going to yank them out of there and arrest them or whatever. However, you know, you can go to Costco or the grocery store and it's full of people. I mean, it makes no sense at all. And the fact that people put up with it, but this goes back to when at least when I was a kid, you grew up thinking that the elected leaders, even if it was of the opposite party, that these were really esteemed, sharp people, best of their breed. I mean, I think the elected officials are herd of ego people, and you can understand why so many people will go to business or science or whatever and steer away from that, because there's no upside. And I guess if you really want to try and get something done, that's not the place to get something done. It's just a place to spin wheels and, you know, investigate, and no one ever seems to pay. No one ever goes to jail in these investigations, but, you know, the bills are enormous. I mean, it really is an interesting, this country has such incredible foundation, incredible philosophical roots. But then you just wonder, how are some of these people our elected leaders?
So George, as an advocate, how do you keep your feet on the ground?
Hey, well, I mean, you know, we all just do what we can, Bill, right? You know, we try and put ideas out there. And I guess one of the other big disappointments is that, you know, well, the great book was Common Sense by Thomas Paine in 1776. But what is clear to most of us is that common sense is just not so common.
Oh, man.
Right?
Yeah. Right. You know, that's so... And yes. Tell us about Sunbreak Ranch. There's something with common sense. Tell us about that.
Okay. Yeah. And that's an interesting one. So Sunbreak Ranch, San Diego has quite a homeless problem. I think the 4th largest in the nation. Now, again, I'm a native, and I've been working in downtown San Diego for 32, 33 years. And there's always been a homeless issue. But about 5-6 years ago, it really exploded downtown. I mean, got out of sight. And so an idea came to me, like they tend to come up to me, was this concept of why not have a place? Because let me backtrack. I've been in Rotary for 30 some years as well. We've always been involved in helping the homeless, you know, feeding, funding, the whole shebang. But when it really exploded 5-6 years ago, I kind of looked around and I said, you know, why doesn't anything really change? I mean, we were doing the same old things we were doing 30 years ago, but the problem's only gotten way bigger. So does it really make sense to keep just doing these same things and the problem gets worse? So the idea was, well, why are we letting these people, you know, they're our brothers and sisters, you know, fundamentally, and having difficult times. Why are we letting them just wallow on the streets, surrounded by drug dealers and horrible influence? And it's like that in every city, in the downtown. I mean, the homeless people are congregated and terrible influences are all around them. So I thought, well, why not set up a place outside of town? In San Diego in particular, there's a place called Otay Mesa, which is 13 miles from downtown with highways, buses, the whole deal, but it's remote. You'd be surprised how close it is. It feels very remote. I thought, why not a place there where you set up all your homeless operations? You can invite all the homeless service providers there. You get the people away where you can feel, you know, a fresh breath of air to turn your life around. You can keep the negative influences, the drug dealers and gang members away, and all the, you know, pimps and whatever else go along with that whole show, and go from there. And so that was the concept. And I had that idea 6-7 years ago, and I'd written a lot of things, obviously, and I've had plenty of arrows in my back for things I've written, like those financial things. And I thought, this is one article I'm never going to seek to publish because I'm going to get accused of trying to set up a concentration camp outside of it.
Yeah.
And I do not need any more arrows in my back. But this idea was in my mind of Sunbreak Ranch. And so a handful of years go by, and Bill will know there's an on-ramp downtown at 17th Street getting onto Highway South. And it turned into this massive homeless encampment. I mean, on both sides of the street, right to an on-ramp going on to Highway 5, major highway. So I would go that way a lot. And so I'm getting on the highway and it's completely consumed with tents all over the place. And I'm starting to get on the on-ramp, and it's a short on-ramp. So you got to accelerate pretty quick to get up to speed since you're getting on to 5. And a little kid goes wandering right in front of me. Now, fortunately, my eyes were forward and not to the right, looking at the homeless people. And I stopped and it was fine. But I thought, you know, if I had just glanced away, I would have taken out that kid. So that night I said, you know what, this is ridiculous. The mayor does nothing. The city council does nothing. I don't even know what the hell the police are doing to let this encampment be there. It's a public health risk. It's a risk to those children. So I wrote the article, you know, that night, because it had always been in my mind. And that was the concept of Sunbreak Ranch. So a good buddy of mine, Brian Castor, is a big, they own a lot of self-storage. I said, Brian, and he's a big Catholic Christian guy that always wants to do good things. I said, read this article and see what you think. And he made some twists. So we co-authored, and it was published in the San Diego Union Tribune. And I thought it would be like a lot of articles, you know, you publish it, a couple of people comment, and then it's gone. But we got this storm of people emailing us, calling us, saying, finally, someone with a common sense solution to this problem. And from there, we built a website and built the concept, got a huge endorsement team. But, you know, the political leaders, the mayor, they don't want to do anything. And so fundamentally, where we've taken it to now, which I think is the right way to handle this, but we can't with this epidemic because it's consumed all oxygen, was a concept we call federal leadership, local control. And that's where you get a President Trump or whoever it may be to say, we are going to designate 12, instead of just doing San Diego, do 12 of them up the whole West Coast, 12 sites on federal land, because that eliminates all the NIMBYism, trying to get approvals, city council, everything on federal land, set up 200-acre sites outside of each city.
Nice.
Cited 12 of them up the coast. That will be each place's Sunbreak Ranch. And so the federal government will then send in the Marines or the CBs and use the surplus equipment from Afghanistan and Iraq and build tent cities in each one of those, which they could do literally in a week or two. I've seen them do it in Coronado at the SEAL base here. And then turn it over to a consortium of local leaders to run the Sunbreak Ranches. That's the only way you're going to get it done, because the locals are never going to get the land. The politicians, they just look in each way, whichever gets them a vote. But if the federal government, so, in this, I don't know if you know Coronado at all, John, but it's a huge military base, obviously.
Yeah, I used to go up to Soledad and look out there and see it. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, at the southern tip of Coronado, about 3 years ago, they built, I forget what the technical name on it, but they built a new SEAL base, and they didn't ask for permission, for approvals, for anything. They built that base in about a year's time, and it's a massive facility now. You drive by there and see all the buildings there. It was federal land. They just did it, and that's the way you escape all the NIMBYism and problems, is get the federal government too, and they can do it cheap and then hand it off to each city's local consortium. But with doing that, it has to come with an agreement that each city or state will return to rule of law on the streets. You have to have rule of law, and this epidemic has proven the risks of public health risks. Now, spin back 2-3 years ago, we had, after I wrote the first article about Sunbreak Ranch, a hepatitis A outbreak on the streets of San Diego, caused 20 homeless individuals to die, and there were about 600 cases, which was a big deal then. Now it seems small compared to this epidemic situation, but it was crystal clear why the risk of public health, and the government does have a role not to allow public health risks to the community. So doing something like this would have to come with an agreement to return to rule of law, and that's not meant to hurt the homeless, it's meant to actually help them. And that's what, too many people don't understand.
I got to tell you, that Sunbreak Ranch, I've heard a lot of ideas. That's probably the most commonsensical idea that I've heard in the last 40 years, especially to a problem that affects all communities on so many different levels. And, George, I'll tell you, I know we're getting towards the end here, but I know that the bureaucracy, which you talk about, is what stifles any commonsensical idea. And you start thinking about, you're making me think about, what can we do around, we could use a Sunbreak Ranch here. We've got the same issue. And what a marvelous idea, common sense. So where do you see yourself in 5 years? I know you might not be thinking out that far, but where do you see yourself in the future? Let's say the future, forget a time period on it. And then can you tell us one book that you're reading that you recommend to our listeners? Something like that.
Okay. That's interesting. In 5 years, well, every time I buy my lottery ticket, in 5 years, I see myself on my private G6 plane jetting off somewhere. Yes. But it just doesn't seem to happen, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, and going back to the Sunbreak Ranch thing, John, the idea was always originally San Diego, and then we expanded the federal leadership local control concept to be 12, do the whole West Coast. But I argue that San Diego should be the model. You could do it here. And once you do it once, you get President Trump or President Biden or whoever it is to actually do it and succeed, then you could replicate that all over the nation. It doesn't, it can be smaller Sunbreak Ranches for smaller communities, but it becomes the model of not letting your brothers and sisters wallow and die in the streets, but having a place to help them that also cleans up your city.
Awesome, man.
Yeah. So a particular book, trying to think of the last one that I read, but I don't know that that's one I would recommend. I mean, I guess I would go back to, if you want fun, A Confederacy of Dunces. I don't know if you ever read that.
I haven't, but I love the title, man.
Oh, you need to read it. You need to read the book. It's a funny book. But it's also kind of about the craziness of society. It's called A Confederacy of Dunces. I recommend you read it, John. And
awesome.
then for people that want to get to the roots of this country, Common Sense by Thomas Paine.
Yep.
Been around for a long time.
Yeah, that's right. Sure has. And one last one. I think I'm getting the name wrong. The great one by the guy that was in a concentration camp.
Victor Frankl.
Man's Search for Meaning.
The Man's Search for Meaning. That's an incredible book. And
awesome.
So that would be one I'd add to those three.
Well, thanks for those recommendations, man. I know people are going to be picking them up. I know I'm going to get the Dunces one, and maybe I should revisit Thomas Paine, bring some common sense back into my own life. And I know that people are looking for thought provocation like that. And thank you for that.
Well, you know, and if you have time, just, you know, one thing that I think is so important is that people do not understand our inherent or inalienable rights or natural rights. They don't understand what that means. Do you have a minute for me to explain?
Absolutely. This is so important right now. Everybody has got a right to something, and it's not always the case.
That's
Yeah.
right. I think this is fundamental to everything. So we talked about our inherent, inalienable, natural rights in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So when we think about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I don't need you, Bill, or you, John, to do anything for my rights to have my life, my liberty, my pursuit of happiness. I just need you not to come over here and try and kill me or tie me up or, you know, try and restrain me from doing what I want to do. I don't need you to do anything proactive. Just don't mess with me. Right. And all of our other rights in the Bill of Rights really stem from that, you know, freedom of speech, to assemble, against illegal seizure, even Second Amendment,
Speedy trial,
right to bear arms, speedy trial. These are about protecting my and your natural rights. So now when you have a guy like Bernie Sanders gets up and says, healthcare is a human right. Okay, is it? Now, so he's effectively saying that it's one of our natural rights to have healthcare. Except I want everyone to have healthcare. We all do. But people need to understand there's a difference between what is a right and what is a need. And so if we say that healthcare is a human right, is a natural right, now I need Bill or John to be my doctor. Or if they can't be my doctor and serve me and do what I need, they need to pay taxes to someone else that will serve me. So it's just like food is a need, but it's not one of our natural rights. And because it forces others to do something for me. And it doesn't mean we don't want people to have food or healthcare. So that's why I get very disturbed when they try to invoke rights on things like that. Those are needs, and they are important needs, but our fundamental rights, and people are too willing to give up our rights. And we've seen it in mass here the last couple of months, people trying to guilt other people to give away their rights because they say so. And so anyway, I think that comes back to be such a root important thing. And I wish the schools would be teaching people about just to understand the simple concept of what those natural rights are and how they're so different from needs that Bernie Sanders or other people will try and claim are part of those rights we should have.
This is an awesome point. Yeah, it's such an important point, and it encourages us to think where we started, right? And that's hard right now. With all the distractions that are going on, I was reading an article this morning from a few years ago about how, thanks to the flat screen, we don't concentrate the way we used to. And we're not sort of intellectually rigorous in a way that we used to be, generally. And the challenge is huge because we've been co-opted now by COVID, as you say, to sort of play on our fears and force the rest of us who are the nice guys in the room to sort of go along with it because that's the way things are going, and we don't want to create more fear by resisting. And yet, you're the resistor, right? You're the advocate and the resistor, and calling for us to take another look, people.
Yeah.
You know, I read the other day where every 11 minutes throughout an entire 8-hour day, that a human in America is checking a device, whether it's a television, a cell phone. But I mean, every 11 minutes. And then we wonder about clarity and focus and concentration and thinking. And if these devices are persuading us on how to think, and you just mentioned rights, I've never heard it said like that, but it's a reminder. So if we're constantly being distracted every 11 minutes, how can we think? And how can we move forward in our individual lives? And so rights, authenticity, thinking, it's so valuable in humanity. And I always say humankind matters. It's what Bill and I talk about. Humans matter.
Yeah.
Distractions don't matter. What matters is how we can work together, collaborate. That's another word they throw around. But how can we really work together on sunbreak ranches and things that have real value? My gosh, I am so really inspired and excited about this interview because you've got my wheels spinning and turning, not spinning, turning, and thinking about man, there's some cool ideas that we could do around here that would really help the local population. Now,
yeah. And as long as you stay open-minded, there are great things. And, on the Sunbreak Ranch, we've been making a lot of headway.
cool.
Greg Gutfeld on Fox News The Five talked about Sunbreak Ranch, unbeknownst to us, advocating it as the solution. The problem right now is that this epidemic has sucked up the oxygen on anything.
Yeah, that's true. But when you break ground, George, invite me out and I'll come out. I would love to see you
We'd
with
love
that
to
little
have you.
hard hat on and the shovel and all that. I know that you got that in your plans, man. So thank you.
Any final words of wisdom? We're going to ask you for wisdom again, George. How do we stay like unafraid right now?
What's your mantra, man?
Well, John hit it. Stay calm. Think and stay calm and don't give up your rights.
Awesome, man.
I think and people shouldn't feel shy. And the protesters, I'm sure some of them are gone too far, but people shouldn't be trying to shame people that want to defend their constitutional rights. If they understood the reasons in 1776 why some of these things were fought for. And even, the right to bear arms. I'm not a gun guy myself, but I understand the principle. The colonists couldn't have guns. The Brits were controlling it. And, there are reasons for these rights. And, but they don't want to understand that now is not really any different than then. It's just, we're technologically more sophisticated. We got planes, but people are still people. And would-be dictators are still would-be dictators. And they're around.
You couldn't say it more eloquent than that. They weren't given, you couldn't have said it more eloquent. But they weren't given to us to hunt squirrels, that's for sure. But thank you for that. And I'm impressed by the work that you've done, George, and completely humbled and honored to have you with Bill and me here today. I wish you great success wherever you go. And I look forward to the day we might be able to meet each other in person.
Well, you're far too kind in your comments about me, John. But
no, it's true though, man. It comes from the heart, and that's just what we do. And the things that you do inspire others, and that's what keeps us going.
Seriously. Thank you very much. And when they let you fly again, hopefully you'll be out here in San Diego and we can have lunch.
That sounds great, man.
Thank you again for having me.
You're welcome.
Hey, George, thanks, man. What a pleasure to be able to sit down and share some wisdom and have some good conversation. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of AHO Radio. Information we mentioned is probably in the show notes, but if we missed anything, please let us know and we'll get it added for you. Subscribe to the AHO Radio channel on YouTube to stay connected, and, as always, we wish you health, success, and significance. AHO!